It snowed again, so I'm leaving a little bit early. And I didn't realize it was going to snow. There's about 2-3 inches of that wet, crunchy shit. It's not the light, powdery shit. It's good for making snowmen. It's not good for driving in, and it's not good for skiing. And I don't have winter tires. And for anybody watching this in the United States who doesn't live in like a climate that gets snow a lot, like, what the fuck are winter tires? In Canada, we have these things that are called winter tires that you put on your car in the winter. I don't have winter. Well, actually, that's not true. I do have winter tires, but they're for my old car. And the service guy says that I could probably put them on this car because it's also a Mazda. Anyway, so I didn't, because I'm lazy and cheap, and so yeah, I'm driving without winter tires in probably 3 inches of crunchy, wet garbage. And so I'm going to be going slow today. So this may be a longer video. Normally my videos are about 14 minutes long, because that's roughly how long it takes me to get to work in the morning. Today it might be a little bit longer, just because I'll be driving a little bit slower. And I gotta try and get through this crap without skidding out and going into a pole. There we go. See, only slight fishtailing. Well, there's a salt truck ahead, so at least this road shouldn't be too bad. What do I want to talk about today? I think I want to talk about something I touched on in my video from yesterday, briefly at the end of it. Something called Taqiyya. And no, it's not a new dish at Taco Bell that mixes a taquito and a quesadilla. A lot of you may already know what Taqiyya is. Taqiyya is a practice in Islam of deception, specifically lying about one's faith. So Taqiyya is permitted in Islam, and by some scholars and some of Muhammad's contemporaries was even encouraged of Muslims to lie about their faith, lie about belonging to the faith, or to lie about certain details regarding the faith. And as far as I know, and again, I'm not a religious scholar, but as far as I know, there's no other major religion which sees lying or deception as being a virtue. Right? It's a sin. It's one of the, it's one of the 10 Commandments. It's, thou shalt not lie. It's a sin in Christianity. It's a sin in Judaism. I don't know enough about Buddhism or Zoroastrianism. Whatever. I don't know enough about many other religions to say yes or no whether or not they uphold lying as a permissible or even encouraged practice. So the question is, given that there's a prescription in Islam for taqiyya, for deception, specifically when dealing with non-Muslims, doesn't that invalidate Islam as a religion in a pluralistic society? I mean, if you look at some of the other doctrine in Islam, that does it as well. But worse, what it does is it calls into question the motives of any Muslim when they're speaking to a non-Muslim. And I mean, that sounds terrible, because if you take it, boil it down to its simplest terms, it means that non-Muslims can't trust Muslims. And I would never say that, except I just did. But I would never espouse that as a belief, because I know for a fact that not all Muslims are duplicitous in nature. You take consideration guys like Majid Nawaz, right? Majid Nawaz is a Muslim reformer. He has a foundation called the Quilliam Foundation, where he's basically trying to bring modernity to Islam. I follow their page and I see their news, but I haven't really looked deeply into Quilliam, but just given the fact that he is he gets attacked on both sides. He gets attacked by people who think Muslims are all evil and Islam is evil, and he gets attacked by fellow Muslims. If you don't know anything about Majid Nawaz was a British Pakistani, meaning he was born in Britain to Pakistani parents, and became radicalized at a young age. Went over to Egypt, I believe, to wage jihad. Was arrested, spent time in jail, and then basically had a change of heart. Came to realize that there's problems within Islam, and it's not the fault of British people. It's not the fault of Western countries. It's a fault within their own religion, their own culture. He's definitely not an alethophobe. But the problem is that Taqiyya calls into question the motives of Majid Nawaz. And this isn't a criticism of Majid Nawaz. This is a criticism of Islam and the prescription of Taqiyya. But because of its existence within the doctrine, and because of the explanations and the apologists' interpretations of Taqiyya as being not only permissible to prevent, death or harm to a Muslim in a non-Muslim land, but also permissible in waging war. That is, you can be deceitful about your religion when behind enemy lines, or when dealing with non-Muslims for the purposes of gaining their trust, or making them less suspicious of you before you hack their head off. So because that exists within Islam, it calls into question the motives of even someone like Majid Nawaz. Well, I'll be honest. I don't agree with him 100% from a political perspective. There are certain things that I disagree with. For instance, when Sadiq Khan was elected mayor of London, Majid Nawaz had a few revelations regarding Sadiq Khan that he purposefully, and he said this in an article, I purposefully kept this back because I didn't want it to affect the election. And this was personal knowledge that he had of Sadiq Khan's past. Now, it's nothing too inflammatory. The fact is, the guy was a barrister and solicitor before he was a mayor. And for a time, he defended terrorists, or people accused of terrorism in the court. Now, all of that would have been public knowledge, I would assume. I assume that court documents in Britain are public knowledge, just like they are anywhere else in a Western country, or in any other Western country. But I guess Majid Nawaz had specific knowledge as to certain counsel that Sadiq Khan provided. And I mean, this is going from memory. I read the article, right after the election of Sadiq Khan. And at the time I was like, wow, that's kind of shitty. You should have let people know you have a platform. You have a position of authority within the community, even if it's only within certain segments of the community. And the fact that you kept this back calls into question your motivations. So, I mean, I'll be honest, for a moment there I was like, maybe Majid Nawaz is a wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, right? And it's not fair for me to make that assumption about the guy. But at the time, I was like, when I read the article, I was like, this to me sounds sinister. Your decision to keep certain information that you had back Sounds sinister. Do I believe Majid Nawaz to be a jihadi? A stealth jihadi who's trying to put a more amenable face to Islam? No, I don't think so. If I'm wrong, and it turns out he is, then at least I can say I had my suspicions, and I aired them here. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I'm doing better. I'm almost at work. It's only 10 minutes, even with the roads the way there. But then you take a person like Ayaan Hirsi, who's an atheist, who grew up in Somalia. She was born to Muslim parents, grew up in Somalia. Her father was a Muslim who, according to her, wasn't around much. He was an educator who, traveled a lot. So she was left to be raised by her grandmother and her mother. And her grandmother was like an old school, female circumcision barbarian. And she, basically, Ayaan Hirsi suffered terribly under the guardianship of her grandmother and mother. She became an apostate and now has to have armed guards. And while she was a minister in Sweden, she had armed guards, paid for by the state. But my understanding is now she still has armed security, but it's paid for by a foundation or several foundations. But here's someone who, I have no belief whatsoever that she is a stealth jihadi because of just the crap she goes through. But again, it brings into question the nature of Islam. I mean, she speaks so vocally against Islam, and I think she encourages apostasy, more than anybody I've ever heard, even more than Bill Maher. But she's traded barbs with Majid Nawaz in several public forums. But here's the scale, right? So Sadiq Khan, new mayor of London, Muslim, in one of his first public speeches, he separated men and women in the audience. Men and women, well, I don't know if he did it, but he spoke to an audience whereby men were at the front and women were put to a position of inferiority at the back of the crowd. His stance on Islam being a part of public life in England is plain, right? I can't trust a thing Sadiq Khan says, not just because he's a politician, but also because he's a Muslim and because of the prescription of Taqiyya. Majid Nawaz, Muslim reformer, former jihadi, former violent terrorist jihadi, arrested, had a change of heart, and now is a Muslim reformer who speaks vocally and often about it. Not a stealth jihadi, but again, Taqiyya calls into question his motivations. Ayaan Hirsi, former Muslim, atheist, watched her friend die in the street, or witnessed her dead friend's body after he was stabbed in the street by a Muslim extremist for making a movie that was unflattering to Islam and Muhammad. I don't believe for a minute she's a stealth jihadi, right? But the question is, can you trust a Muslim because of Taqiyya? You kind of have to, because we live with them every day. But should you? I don't know. And again, this isn't a condemnation of all Muslims. It's a condemnation of Islam and the existence of Taqiyya in Islam. And I know that I'm going to get people telling me, in the comments or with response videos that I don't understand Taqiyya, that Taqiyya was really intended as protection for Muslims in non-Muslim lands, yada yada yada. But given its presence in the doctrine, how can I trust your interpretation isn't sinister? How can I trust that what you're saying to me isn't sinister? Right? The prescription within the doctrine makes it an untrustworthy religion in and of itself, more so than any other aspect of it. Never mind all of its political nature. Never mind the fact that it is a political ideology as well as a religious ideology. Never mind the actions of its adherents, some of its adherents in seeking to establish a global caliphate. Taqiyya, the one piece of doctrine that is Taqiyya, invalidates the entire religion from having a place within a pluralistic society. That's my opinion. Anyway, you can follow me on Twitter at Cragbragg, CraggBragg. Current name there is literally Putin. I have a Facebook page called Craig Bragg's Jimmy Wrestling Politics page. And if you like my video, you can like it and subscribe it. Subscribe to my channel. And I gotta go to work. And it's a 16-minute video because I sat here for 3 minutes. Anyway, talk to you. Bye.